Well, the day will soon be here. We all knew it was coming. It was something we'd seen before. We saw it with the Wii. The store closed. All the games kind of disappeared. That was people's perception. Now we're going to have the same thing happen with the PlayStation 3 and the PS Vita. Their stores will be closing end of August 2021. Ultimately, this has led to a ton of panic buying that I've seen online, both in buying the games digitally on the PSN storefront, where you will actually be able to re-download the games even after the store closes, so long as you've previously purchased it on your account, and also buying the disc copies of the PlayStation exclusives on eBay. Now, things like Infamous, that are super common, they aren't going up in price, but some like, say, the different PlayStation 2 collections, like the Jack collection, Ratchet and Clank collection, the Sly Cooper collection, things like that, they've seen kind of a surge in price, just as well as some of the other first-party titles that maybe didn't have as many copies printed. Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus, things like that, have kind of seen this spike in value due to the fact that people are like, if I don't get these games now, I'll never be able to play them. And of course, I come from the standpoint that, well, that mindset is completely wrong. The PlayStation 3 has been jailbroken really across every firmware and every model for, I think, a few years now, 2 or 3 years probably, which technically makes obtaining backup copies of these games be very plausible. And it's the reason why I like with the Wii, I'm not one that's going to fall prey to kind of panicking over what I need to grab now before Sony decides that at the end of August, it's all over and you'll never see anything PlayStation 3 from them ever again. Because that's kind of what they're saying, and people are treating it like this is their last opportunity to, grab Scott Pilgrim versus the World before it gets delisted or something, when it's not the same situation at all. Now, the big caveat to my point here is, unlike the Wii, where it seems like every single WiiWare game or Wii Virtual Console game was backed up somewhere out there on the internet, it's not really the case with the PlayStation 3. The tools that are accessible to obtain backups of PlayStation 3 games don't actually include literally 100% of everything that's on the PlayStation Store. And odds are, with like 4.5 months to try and sort it out, 4 months to try and sort this out, they probably never will have a 100% backup of that, and it'll ultimately take the community to dump their own things, and there still will be things that will fall through the crack. I think there will be lost media on the PlayStation 3. Personally, I think that myself and the majority of gamers aren't going to be, enough completionist mindset type of individuals to need to have every little thing that was ever released on the PlayStation 3. I don't think that that's plausible, and there's a fair amount of it that's not even worth your time, and those are probably the kind of things that won't get backed up. I know some people want to preserve absolutely everything, and I can't argue with that, but I mean, from the average gamer's perspective of actually playing the games, I don't think you're going to miss out on much just because the store is closing. I don't think that you need to take this as an opportunity to, panic buy a $90 or $100 copy of a game that, a few months ago was worth $20 on eBay. Interesting though, everyone's concern is only around these first-party exclusive Sony games. They're not really concerned about, say something like Blur or Grid or, just some random game that came out this generation. Maybe it came out on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Those aren't the kind of things people are worried about. It's interesting because it's almost like we have this perception that the Xbox 360 store will never close by comparison. And you take a look at what Microsoft's done with backwards compatibility, how they've supported their games going forward, and you could make an argument that to a degree, some of these Xbox 360 games never will be delisted, because if they're still supported on the newer generation consoles via backwards compatibility, then hey, why not keep selling them on those storefronts? But not every game is going to be backwards compatible. I mean, that's just the truth of it. There's tons of games that are on the 360, playable on the Xbox One, the Series X, what have you, but there are plenty that are not, and those are the games that I think are really at jeopardy of eventually being delisted. And because the PlayStation 3 copies will already be gone, you'll really have scarcity then, because they'll be gone across 2 console platforms. So if you really want to take a look at what games you think are going to soar in value, you want to buy them up, you kind of want to speculate on the market per se, I would definitely take a look at those games that aren't backwards compatible on the Xbox One. You can't play those 360 games there, and they were released on both consoles, but people aren't really panic buying those in the same way they are the first party ones. Obviously, there are a ton of PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 games that would fit into this criteria. Not to mention that, let's be honest, there are plenty of Xbox 360 games that never, ever were released for games on demand and thus were never purchasable on a digital storefront. I think people take for granted the fact that you look at the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One and every game that comes out is available in the digital storefront, it seems like, and none of them are physical exclusive, but there are plenty of games from the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation that came out between, say, 2006 and maybe even as late as 2009 that were never available on a digital storefront and have been disc only this entire time, and that never caused them to spike in value. Not to mention, nobody ever freaked out about the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, and those games were never released digitally. So honestly, I think that the reaction that they're kind of getting from this is completely overblown. And yeah, I get it. Some of these games were only exclusively released on PSN, but let's be honest, if you didn't want to buy and already own the game, 10 years ago when it came out on PSN, why do you want to buy it and own it right now? You didn't want to play it 10 years ago. Why do you think you want to play it 10 years from now? It just seems like you kind of overhyped the whole thing. So that's my opinion. If you want to make a quick buck off this, I recommend you look at the third-party titles that people aren't grabbing up right now that were released on both consoles, because honestly, those are the ones that, if they're not backwards compatible, will eventually become delisted from both storefronts, I would anticipate. And those are the ones that you could probably pick up really cheap now and make a quick buck off of whenever they announce that the Xbox 360 store is closing for those native Xbox 360 games that never made it to being backwards compatible. That day will come. I don't know when it'll be, but it'll be here eventually, especially if PlayStation's pulling the plug on the PlayStation 3. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I'll see you in the next video.